Welcome to the voice of college football, the USC Trojans live show here. And so, Mark Rogers, hey, he has been carrying this broadcast. Of course, he carries the voice of college football franchise. Well, it's the Feast of Stephen. It's Boxing Day, and Mark needs some time with his family, and that's a very important thing. So we have Mark's back. Mark's been great to us, but we want to help out Mark today and carry the USC live show without Mark. And hey, I have three great guys to carry me. Your guest host here at the Voice of College Football, Tony Altimore, Tim Prangley, Rick Anaya, LVC Trojan. They're always with you on the USC post-game show, so they're going to be with you after the 2023 Cotton Bowl next Monday afternoon, wrapping it all up after USC plays Tulane. And, of course, you can also find them on the Wednesday night Pac-12 chat show. I believe that's a 10:30 p.m. Eastern broadcast every Wednesday. Yep. So join them for the Pac-12 chat show this upcoming Wednesday while there are bowl games going on. Hey, come in and talk some Pac-12. And hey, we have Steve Helwick as our special guest. When why waste time? Let's bring him on in here at the start because Steve is taking some time out of his Feast of Saint Stephen to be with us. So if you don't know Steve's work, hey, you want to check him out at Underdog Dynasty, the other outlets that he writes for. He's helped he helped preview the Rice game in week 1. So now he's here helping us to preview the Tulane game. So he's helping us.
If we could just have a repeat of that game, it would be awesome.
That's our Christmas wish, but you don't get every Christmas wish you want.
Yeah, you don't see 3 pick sixes much in a single game. It's been a while since that had happened.
It was pretty, Steve. It was pretty.
So, Steve, thanks for taking time out of your Christmas and holiday celebrations to be with us here at the Voice of College Football. And, Mark had you on earlier in December a little bit to talk about Tulane, but, we do have some new information, at least from the USC side about this game, with it's confirmed that Andrew Voorhees will not play. He's off to the NFL. Jordan Addison won't play. He's off to the NFL. So you can comment on those developments, but also tell us if there are any new developments in terms of Tulane's roster situation, players moving on to the draft or staying on, things of that nature. But start off with how the matchup for Tulane changes as a result of Addison and Voorhees in particular not being available for USC in the Cotton Bowl.
Well, the absence of him is huge, but I do think that USC's receiving core still runs deep where they're going to be able to thrive offensively against Tulane even without him. I mean, you still have Mario Williams, Brendan Rice, 2 transfers that did a great job this year, and then Kyle Ford, who we saw some of in that Pac-12 championship game. So I think, and even Taj Washington, who got that game started in the scoring department. So I still think that you have a deep receiving core with a lot of the transfers I just mentioned in there, but Addison's the number one. That's the priority. And I think that missing him does definitely affect USC's offense, but I do think that their depth should be enough where I think that they'll still be able to survive against Tulane. This one, I think, is more of an offensive shootout. I'm not concerned about USC's offense in this game as much as I am as their defense. And can they hang with Tulane in that regard? And I know that Goforth is going to transfer, and that's going to be the main absence there from the portal. But I think that as long as they can get their defense sorted out, I think that the Trojans have a good chance of winning this game.
Any personnel developments from the Tulane side that we need to be aware of here in USCville?
I believe that wide receiver Taijae McDougal is going to be out for this game due to injury, and I think that's the only significant injury that I can think of at the moment. I know that Michael Pratt, the quarterback, and Sincere Haynesworth, a star All-AAC center, both announced their return for the 2023 season with Tulane and the new-look AAC next year, so that's some roster development for this game. But this is such a big game for Tulane history and Tulane football that this is a game they're really amped up for. The guys are all going to play in this one. You won't see any opt-outs there for the draft, and they're a pretty healthy team going into this game too, which is really nice.
Guys, Tim, Rick, Tony, any questions for Steve? Want to make sure that the whole panel gets a chance to throw him some questions about this game. And of course, Steve's been following the AAC very closely all season long. So fire away, guys.
I think.
All right. I have a question for you.
Right.
So one of the things that, funny enough, so a year ago, everyone made fun of me when I said that the Big 12 should actually consider Tulane for realignment purposes. And now all of a sudden I look like a genius a year later. Are the folks like within Tulane circles thinking of this as a chance to make a splash on the national scene and show that they belong in a call up somewhere?
I haven't heard too much dialogue about that, but what I think Tulane wants to do and have the possibility to do is become the new class of the AAC without UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston in the conference. The college football playoff expands to 12 teams in 2024, and that format has the top 6 conference champions. Well, the AAC gets this New Year 6 bid every single year. I mean, it's honestly an automatic AAC bid at this point. The Mountain West won it once in 2014 with Boise State. That was before the AAC even had a title game. And then in 2016, that was a weird year for the conference where Temple beat Navy, even though Tom Herman's Houston team was clearly the best team in the league. And then 12-0 Western Michigan, 13-0 Western Michigan got in the Cotton Bowl that year. Other than that, the AAC champion has gone to a New Year 6 Bowl every year. So when you look at conference realignment and you can become a class of the 6th best conference in college football, that's a playoff bid almost every year. And I think that's what Tulane fans are more focused on, is becoming the class of the new look AAC, which adds UTSA, Rice, North Texas, Charlotte, FAU, and UAB next year, and loses the 3 aforementioned teams that are usually the ones that are in the mix of the conference race. So I think that is more what Tulane is focused on. But also of note, Tulane does have, I believe, 3 SEC championships, and that is something that Tulane fans flaunt all the time, especially to fans of teams like Texas A&M and whatnot who have fewer than 3 SEC championships.
They do.
Yep. Tulane was an SEC member, for those who don't know, from 1933 to 1965.
Charter member, I think, weren't they?
Well, if the SEC was founded in 33, yeah, that would check out. Rick, you were about to formulate a question.
Yeah, Steve, I had a question, and you had talked about it last week. And I think one of the interesting matchups you'd mentioned, Raylan Goforth, a linebacker who had a lot of playing time with USC this year, jumped into the transfer portal. So I think an interesting dynamic is going to be watching Taijae Spears. He's the lead running back for Tulane with over nearly 1,400 yards, 6.5 yards per carry, 15 TDs. It's going to be interesting to see USC match up with Taijae. Give our viewers a little bit more background of what type of back he is.
Taijae Spears is a tackle breaker. I know you're not going to want to hear that after the performance you saw against Utah, but that's exactly what Taijae Spears did in his last 2 games against Cincinnati and UCF, is he creates yards after first contact, and he keeps his legs driving through the thing. He's a 5'10", 195-pound back. He just has a good mix of speed and strength and leg strength. And there's guys like Bijan Robinson who are the premier tackle breakers, but I would put him in just a class under that when it comes to some of college football's best runners after contact. And he's somebody that doesn't really seem to get stamina problems. It seems like the more times you feed him in a game, the better he gets. And he's had the best stretch of his career coming into this game. He has 7 consecutive games with at least 120 rushing yards. And his last 2 games where Tulane had must-win situations in order to win this conference and get this New Year 6 Bowl bid. Those must-win games against Cincinnati and UCF were the 2 best performances we've seen out of him yet. So he's only getting better right now. So Taijae Spears, you're not going to see him too much as a receiving back. There was 1 game this year where I thought that was his primary role, it felt like, and that was a game where Tulane started their they went with their 3rd-string quarterback against Houston due to injuries. But other than that, Taijae Spears is a guy that's just going to gash you on the ground. You're not going to see too much of him in the receiving game, and Tulane likes to use him on 1st and 2nd down quite often just to move forward, create 3rd and short opportunities should he not pick up the 1st down.
You guys nailed my biggest – that was my biggest fear, because that you nailed it, Rick, because I know that they said, I'm looking at the stat, in FBS, he has the 11th most evaded tackles in FBS, 141 this season. And if you match that up with USC, who happens to be the 12th most missed tackles, exactly 141 missed tackles this season. So those numbers together combine for kind of a scary situation.
All right, Steve. So Will, one of our loyal viewers here at the Voice of College Football, our Notre Dame fan and analyst, he has this question posted on screen. How does this Tulane team compare to other Group of 5 teams that have made the New Year's Six since the New Year's Six began in 2014?
I'm going to put them on a similar level to 2019 Memphis, but not even real. There might not even be that good. If you look at all these New Year's Six teams in that category that have gone, the only one with multiple losses headed into that New Year's Six bowl was 2014 Boise State. Otherwise, it's been conference champions, which are undefeated or have one loss, which are mainly Houston, UCF, Cincinnati. But I would compare this team to 2019 Memphis a lot, in the fact that this team does have a really good running game, which that Memphis team had with Kenneth Gainwell and Antonio Gibson. And it feels like that they can produce enough offense through that. And then they have a lot of good defensive players that can force turnovers. And that Memphis team did feel a little reliant on turnovers. I would say their defense is stronger than that Memphis team, but their offense isn't as good. Yeah, they looked really explosive in the AAC title game against UCF. That was a career performance, not only for Taijae Spears, but it was also a career performance for the quarterback, Michael Pratt, who's not usually your throw for 300 plus yards quarterback to win a game. But that game, passes were working, and he got 394 yards and 4 touchdown passes in that game, mainly on just testing guys and man coverage. And those receivers would make one guy miss and score touchdowns. But overall, I would say that this Tulane team is one of the they're a strong team. They're the AAC champions. They have some good wins. They beat Kansas State. They beat UCF. But compared to some of these recent Cincinnati and UCF teams, I don't think they would pose as much as a threat as those Bearcats and Knights teams did.
Yeah, and just for our viewers here at the Voice of College Football, the comparison to 2019 Memphis went to the Cotton Bowl as the Group of 5 champion, and Penn State beat Memphis 53-39 in that Cotton Bowl. It would not be particularly shocking if we had another 53-39 game in this Cotton Bowl here. All right, Steve, another question from a viewer here at the Voice of College Football. Gixxer Squid, I haven't seen Michael Pratt play much. What are his strengths and weaknesses? And before you answer that, worth ducking in here that Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch have gone up against Michael Pratt before, and that was in the 2021 season opener when Tulane almost pulled the huge upset. Oklahoma was preseason number 2, so it took the field with a number 2 national ranking. And I believe that game was originally scheduled to be played in New Orleans, but there was a hurricane and it got relocated to Norman. And so 40-35, Temple had a 4th and 1 around the Oklahoma 45 with around 2 minutes, maybe $1.30 left. Tulane came that close to knocking off number 2 Oklahoma. So while giving Gixxer Squid and our other USC fans a primer on Michael Pratt, you could also go into anything that you recall or have studied from that Tulane-Oklahoma game in terms of how Michael Pratt might adjust to Alex Grinch, and Alex Grinch might adjust to a newer, better, more polished Michael Pratt 2 full seasons later.
I think a lot of times your biggest leap a quarterback makes is from year 2 to year 3 as a starter. And that's what Michael Pratt has done this year. He's improved on all of his stats across the board, and he seemed to get better as the season progresses. I thought accuracy was one of his issues a lot in his first 2 seasons, and he completed sub 58% of his passes those year. But this year he was up to almost 65%, and his touchdown to interception ratio was better than ever. He got better at evading pressure, and he was able to throw for more yards and complete deeper throws. Michael Pratt is extremely tough runner. He's not somebody who's going to run for 100+ yards a game, but he's somebody who's going to move the sticks, pick up tough first downs, a QB power, QB draw, and short yard situations. Michael Pratt is going to power through and get those. He's built 210 pounds. He has a good low center of gravity. He reminds me a lot of Sam Ehlinger in college, of the way his running style and basically some of his short throwing mechanics remind me a lot of Sam Ehlinger. So he's third-year starter now, was really polished, I thought, even as a true freshman. He led the country in touchdowns that year. But the fact that Pratt has the ability, even when his passing game wasn't working, such as a Kansas State game this year, he was completing 50% of his passes. He had 2 picks. He was able to win that game with some of his tough running. And that was his best rushing game of the season, had 87 yards, almost 7 yards a carry. So I think the versatility in Pratt's game has really helped. You don't really expect him to throw the deep ball too much. Pratt really likes to target the outsides to his receivers. He likes to target the boundary. I said he likes to try to get guys in space with man coverage and make people miss, and that's more Tulane's style. Is they have a lot of guys with good speed and agility on the outsides, and I think Pratt likes to try to get the ball to those guys and make them move in space. So that's kind of his style there. But I was really impressed with his performance against UCF with 394 yards, 4 touchdowns. Just looked super poised that entire game from the first drive on, super confident, and I like the direction he's headed in. He has another year in front of him too, and I'm excited to see where he could grow after this pretty spectacular 2022 campaign he's had.
In terms of, other elements of this matchup, I spent the past week looking at the AAC championship game, Tulane against UCF. And of course, Tulane had the benefit of playing UCF a second time. And, when you joined Mark and myself for a previous show here at the Voice of College Football, you talked about the things that Tulane was able to do better the second time around. But one of the limitations that UCF had on offense is that John Reese Plumlee, the UCF quarterback, just doesn't push the ball down the field. He's not really a prodigious thrower. Like he's, great runner. We saw that at Ole Miss. He carried that along to UCF. And obviously, Caleb Williams, he can run, but he's an elite passer. We saw it all season long. So like in terms of the difference between going up against UCF's offense and Plumlee versus Caleb Williams, I mean, naturally a much higher skill level, but more specifically, just the passing game and the downfield threat is more pronounced with USC. So if you're Tulane trying to defend against that, like who do you think is the real linchpin or centerpiece player who needs to hold up under pressure, and against the test that USC is going to provide? Who's the Tulane player who's going to be the nerve center for this defense going up against Caleb Williams and USC?
I would say Macon Clark, the free safety there. He's one of their main guys in deep zone coverage that they like to use this year. Clark had a few passes defended, but he was really good at forcing turnovers. He had a pair of forced fumbles this year, a fumble recovery, 2 interceptions. And he's somebody that I would like to see as someone in deep zone who needs to get those reads and force interceptions on USC. We saw Utah get an interception, I believe that was out of zone coverage in that fourth quarter of that Pac-12 championship game near the sideline. And you just need guys that have their head on a swivel making plays like that, because USC's receivers, they know how to get open. And I was saying when I was with you and Mark earlier, I'm a little concerned on the philosophy of Tulane just dropping 8 in this game, because I know that Tulane's defense operates best when they're applying pressure, and that's what we saw in that AAC championship game. They were able to hold Plumlee to negative rushing yards because of the amount of pressure they put on. They went from 0 sacks in their first meeting to many sacks in their second meeting. So I think that Tulane's defense operates best when they're calling out blitzes for the linebackers, Dorian Williams, Nick Anderson, when their defense is just applying pressure. So I'm a little concerned about the dropping 8. So I do think that these safeties really need to step up and have that pressure and coverage work together and see these safeties get some pass deflections and interceptions, because USC's receivers can do a lot of damage, even if Jordan Addison isn't in the lineup.
One of the things I'm interested in seeing, and you're talking about that, Steve, is it's going to come down to the health of Caleb Williams. How much is he going to be able to scramble, extend the plays? You look at Tulane, and they have 11 interceptions on the year. They have 24 sacks. Now compare that to USC. USC's a little bit more opportunistic, number 3 in the country with 36 sacks. So here's a situation who hasn't had as many carries as Travis Dye. He just started picking up the workload when Travis Dye was injured with Colorado. He did pick up 120 yards against UCLA, 154 against Notre Dame. So it'll be interesting to see what Tulane does defensively to contain Williams and Austin Jones, and how's that going to affect their secondary? Tell us who in the secondary is the one that or maybe there's more than one that USC has to key in on to see if they can slow down these receivers.
That would be their all AAC corner, Jarius Monroe, I think, who's going to have the biggest coverage in terms of the corners man coverage for this game, who's going to need to stop them. And then Caleb Williams, I think even if he is reduced to more of a pocket passer in this game, I'm still impressed by his talents. I mean, he threw for 363 yards against Utah. I know a lot of those possessions didn't result in points in the second half, especially, but he was still getting the team downfield in position to score. And I think even on screen passes to Travis Dye and some of these really good receiving running backs or short yardage receivers USC has, I do think that Williams is going to be able to operate pretty well, even if he's not at 100% health, just due to his sheer passing ability, which I know Tulane faced an injured John Rice Plumlee who couldn't get on the run at all in that AAC title game. He had a hamstring injury and he missed half the game, but he checked back in and became more of a pocket passer. And Tulane still almost blew the lead because Plumlee was able to dice through that secondary. So that's my comparison I'm making with Caleb Williams. Is I don't think I'm as concerned about his health, because I think even if he's a pocket passer in this game, like John Rice Plumlee resorted to in the second half of that AAC championship game, I still think that they have a favorable matchup against Tulane's secondary.
Well, they had the 24 sacks. I saw this stat, but they've rushed the quarterback or had contact with the quarterback 219 times, which is about 7th in the FBS. So they may not finishing the job, but they're getting to the quarterback. And if Williams is not 100%, or if you have Miller, who's a great quarterback, he can move in the pocket as well, but maybe not as mobile as Williams. That gives you a lot of concern because, they are doing a patchwork on our offensive line, right? We're moving guys around. We're fitting them around because you have Voorhees and Nealon out. So you're sliding, you have to slide over Dietich to center, and then you got to break in Monheim and Murphy to come in. So it's going to be a patchwork line, right? So my concern is like you said, that they have the 24 sacks, but they're getting to the quarterback a lot. So now you're saying they have an all AAC conference corner. That's kind of worrying. So just wanted to put that out there as well.
Yeah, the sacks and the pressure was why I was saying earlier is why you think that dropping 8 and against USC seems like a good idea, but I just feel like Tulane's defense just works best when they're applying that pressure, even if it is a very risky philosophy against a team like USC.
Steve, I'm interested in what your uncertainties are about USC. Like, you're the Tulane AAC Group of 5 expert. Like, in terms of studying USC, what questions do you have for Tim, Rick, and Tony in terms of anything you want to find out more about USC and how the Trojans line up for this game?
I mean, I do follow all 131 teams, so I've watched a lot of USC this year, and just one thing. Every game, I was just amazed by the sheer turnover differential and how they were able to rely on that. Even in games where they blew teams out. Like, look at the Stanford game. I think the final score was 41-28 of that game. Stanford turned the ball over in the worst places to turn the ball over, near the goal line, like so many times in that game where it felt like that game should have been closer had Stanford been able to get the job done. So do you think that a lot of that turnover differential this year, because turnovers can mean two things. A lot of it's luck, and then there's a lot of skill involved, being in the right positions, having peanut punches and good rip outs on some of those fumbles. Do you think that USC's turnover differential this year, what would you say is like the skill luck trade-off in that, and how sustainable do you think that would be for this game?
Well, I mean, the thing is I think that if you look at the statistics, they vastly show that it's not luck. I mean, there's math in that, and you don't lead the country when it's luck. Particularly when you actually look at the guys and you see the guys punching at it. One of the things that sometimes they took flack for is there were times that they were trying to make turnovers happen. and then they didn't happen. And then, some of the media got all over the players, but that was one of their things. And, quite honestly, one of the things that this defense did very, very effectively was sort of solve some of their weaknesses by creating turnovers. And they are not a perfect defense. This USC team is in a rebuild. And I mean, I can't think of a more successful team in terms of actually the rebuild, because Steve, I don't know if you watched this team last year. They were atrocious and their defense was appalling. And so, yeah, they have holes. No, they're not perfect, but they are doing remarkably well, and they're finding ways to do it. And one of the ways they're doing is with turnovers.
And you have a kind of a freaky guy, right, at middle linebacker in Gentry. And you saw when he went down in that Utah game, you saw the actually interceptions dip a little bit. And when you have a guy in there just doing so much, getting in passing lanes, tipping the ball, making things happen. Again, I go with what Tony said. It's not luck. I kept hearing turnover luck. When's going to run out? Well, it really didn't run out all season until Gentry went down. He was hurt. The fact that Tuipulotu's could be in this game, applying pressure, right? There's two parts to this: guys covering the back end and then putting pressure on the quarterback. With Tuipulotu, the leader in sacks and I believe tackles for loss in the FBS teams, he's going to be up in the backfield a lot. So those two factors, along with some really talented guys, Mekhi Blackman is one of the most, he came in from Colorado. He's a great lockdown corner, and I'm thinking everyone stays healthy. The defensive side of the ball is what I'm worried about tackling, but as far as covering, as far as passing, I'm very happy.
Yeah, you need Kalen Bullock, those guys on the back end, especially this game, last line of defense, just to definitely make their tackles. Is one of the things for USC that I would be concerned about. For Tulane, though, you mentioned Tuipulotu. I voted that guy as a Bednarik Award winner. I think he's the best defender in the country. And for a team of transfers, he's one of the few incumbent players starting from that atrocious team last year. And he is just an all-around talent. I'm a little concerned about how little time Pratt's going to have just due to Tuipulotu's pressure, because he's sensational and he's a future NFL star, I think. So I'm a little concerned about how Tulane's offensive line is going to handle him this game, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of times where Michael Pratt just can't let these routes develop because there's going to be so much pressure in that backfield.
Yeah, and Marlon was the 4-star, right? His big brother. And then Tuli was his afterthought. This 3-star kid was coming in after his brother, and just turns out he shot. I agree. I think he had the numbers, and I think he got robbed in the award ceremonies. But I think hopefully that'll put a chip on his shoulder, right? And he'll be ready to play.
I think that's a good point that you bring up, Steve. Is he going to have enough time for these routes to develop? I'm looking at the wide receivers, and you got Shea Wyatt and Deuce Watts, the law firm of Watts and Wyatt, with a 19.8 and 18.5 average. They run longer routes. Who are some of the possession receivers that catch the underneath stuff in a situation where maybe Pratt's not going to have that much time?
I mean, a lot of the times it is Wyatt and Watts. And I said earlier that Tulane's not really a deep ball team. They're guys that can get a ton of yards after catch, after plays. And they're really just agile guys with a couple good moves in their arsenal that can make guys miss. So Wyatt and Watts can be good short yardage threats. But another guy I would point to is Taijae James, the tight end. He's somebody this year, they use him on shovel passes sometimes. They'll use him on just short yard out routes by the goal line. Like, I think Taijae James is a guy that they really like for short yardage threats. Another one I would go to is Lawrence Keys. He had a huge just a quick hitch hook route in the AAC championship game that he took for a touchdown. Lawrence Keys is another receiver that I think would be a short yardage guy that could have one of those like 6-catch, 43-yard stat lines in this game that Pratt could go to if he doesn't feel like he's having enough time. So I do think that Tulane, it doesn't really feel like that they have really a commanding receiver like some of these AAC teams like Houston and Rice do with Tank Dell and Rashee Rice. It really feels like more of a receiver guy by committee, where Pratt's comfortable throwing to just a myriad of guys, and whoever is open is really his guy. He reads through his progressions pretty well. He doesn't really have a number one target that he prefers.
2023 is going to be the last year with a 4-team college football playoff. So I'm pretty sure, Steve, that you've thought about 12-team playoff scenarios. Let's just dwell on the land of hypotheticals. If we did have a 12-team playoff this year, and so Tulane having a seat at the table, having a chance to play a first-round game, is there a specific opponent you really would have wanted this Tulane team to face, or is there like a particular matchup in which Tulane would have thrived or been in unique trouble? And is USC does USC check any of those boxes, either the best case or worst case scenarios? Because we have like a 2-loss Alabama team, we have a 1-loss Ohio State team that's in the 4-team playoff, but Michigan knocked its block off and Ohio State got exposed in that game. You have a wobbly Clemson team. You have TCU, a very intriguing team. Just is there a particular matchup that with Tulane that either would have really excited you or really scared you, or hey, you can go in a different direction with this too? But just, I'm sure you've mapped out some Tulane hypothetical scenarios, and just if there's anyone that really struck a chord with you, you can share it with us here at the Voice of College Football.
Well, let's see. Tulane would have been the 12 seed in the college football playoff at the 12 team. They would have faced a 5 seed, the top ranked team that did not win its conference. That would be the TCU Horned Frogs. So I think that's a pretty interesting matchup. You have 2 tough quarterbacks. Say Duggan's more of a runner than Pratt, but these guys are just, I just think of them as just tough tank-like quarterbacks that are really fun to watch, and they just really seem to put a lot on the line for their teams. Now, TCU is so explosive. I think they led the country in 50-plus yard touchdowns this year. One of my favorite teams to watch in college football, and I can't be more excited for that game against Michigan, whether you have that receiving core with Quentin Johnston, Darius Davis, Tay Barber, who seem, at least 1 or 2 of them seem to get a 50-yard touchdown every single game. And then when you have an explosive running game with Kendre Miller, I think that would be a really fun matchup to watch against Tulane, to see how they could handle it and see if Tulane can get that same degree on offense. There were times TCU's defense wasn't at their best this year. I mean, there were times that they were elite, like that Texas game, but I'm thinking at the first half of the Kansas State game, the first half of the Oklahoma State game, they definitely showed the second half of the Kansas game, they showed some signs of letting up some on the defensive end. So I wonder if Tulane could try to keep up with the Horned Frogs in a shootout form. I think TCU would get the win overall, but I think it would be a fun track meet style game that you could see, similar to the TCU-SMU game that we had earlier in the season, the battle for the Iron Skillet, where TCU jumped ahead, but SMU's offense kind of got a little comeback in there and made it a close game at the end, coming down to an onside kick recovery for the Horned Frogs. So I really like that TCU matchup. I would be a little terrified of Tulane playing against Michigan or Georgia. Like, I don't think those games would be pretty for the Green Wave at all. Let's not forget, this Tulane team did lose a game to Southern Miss at home this year, and I don't even think it was as close as the scoreboard indicated at 27-24. Tulane had a late touchdown to make that game 27-24. That was just a disastrous offensive game where I felt like the defense, and it was a disastrous offensive and special teams game. Defense gave themselves a little bit of a shot to hang in that game, but Southern Miss really beat Tulane, and I think that might be almost as concerning of a loss as I've seen of an AAC champion in recent memory, outside of maybe 2015 Houston's loss to UConn.
Is there anything for Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch to take from the film study of that game, or do you just say, oh, that was an aberration, it was in the early part of the season, you just kind of throw it in the trash bin, you don't assign too much weight to it? Or is there really something that USC staff can glean from that?
That's a really good question, because Southern Miss didn't really seem to play the best game offensively themselves. I said Tulane had a crucial pick 6 in that game, and they just struggled on special teams. I'm looking at the stats now. Southern Miss had 59 yards rushing and 194 yards passing in that game. They did not play well on offense, but Tulane's offense just kind of self-destructed in that game against Southern Miss's defense, as Southern Miss was able to apply a ton of pressure on Tulane that game. And once again, that pressure and coverage worked really well together. Michael Pratt, that was not his finest hour that game. They struggled as a passing unit, and Tulane just wasn't able to get drives done that game. A lot of it was just third, fourth down play calling. They were coming up short too much. So I do think that game is still part of Tulane's identity this season. I don't think it was too early on. It was their 4th game of the season. It was a week after they beat Kansas State 17-10 in Manhattan. Their offense hadn't been established yet, and they weren't clicking like they are now. But I think that there are some signs in that game for the passing offense where if Tulane is under that much pressure, things could go south.
Panelists, do we have any more questions for Steve?
What's your?
All right.
Give us your predicted score.
Predicted score in this one. I'm going to go a little higher scoring end. I compared this game to the Penn State-Memphis game of 2019 earlier. That was a game where Memphis gets out to a 17-7 lead. Then Micah Parsons really takes over for Penn State. And Journey Brown, running back in his final collegiate game, unfortunately was never able to play again, had over 200 rushing yards and really took out that Memphis defense. A lot of tackling issues were seen in that game on both sides. And I think that could be a similar way to how this unfolds. I do think that Taijae Spears is going to get good rushing yards in this game. And as Matt mentioned earlier, I covered that USC-Rice game in the fall. Before Rice was trying to pass every game to catch up, Rice was getting a lot of good running yards early on in that game. And Rice is not one of the elite rushing offenses in the country. I think Taijae Spears is going to get his in this game. I think USC's passing offense is going to get theirs. I think a couple turnovers might swing in favor of the Trojans, and I would say USC is going to win this game. Little high scoring. Right now, I'm going to go 45-34.
I like it.
The Trojans. I think the spread's 3.5 right now.
And total 62.5. You're going flying way over that.
Oh, and will I see
like
any of you in Arlington, Texas for the game?
Are you going?
Yes.
Oh, nice. I'm envious.
Yeah.
You're going, aren't you?
What?
I will not be there, unfortunately.
Steve, you may not be aware of this, but the state of Texas has not been the best place for USC over the past 20 years.
I am a Texas alum. I was at the 2018 game with the blocked field goal and all of that. So, yes.
Okay, we're not friends anymore then. All right, cut him off. Cut him off. No, I'm just teasing. Hook 'em horns, actually.
Wait, 2017 was an instant classic there.
It was. I'm just teasing. Yeah. So our days of the state of Texas since that let's see, we had the one Cotton Bowl that went really well.
The Sun Bowl didn't go well.
The Sun Bowl did not go well, but the Sun Bowl I don't
Alabama
count
game didn't go well.
The reason I don't count the Sun Bowl was because I remember the band coming back and warning us and getting emails from my friends in the band that when they were coming back drunk from Mexico, they ran into the football team on their way across the border, and they were like, "Oh, tomorrow's not going to go well," and it did not. And that coach wasn't that the coach? I think he had a kid who got into coaching, but is somehow not in coaching anymore after today. Hackett. Okay, sorry, I'm done. That was Hackett.
Steve, tell us what else you're doing for Underdog Dynasty during this full week of bowl coverage leading up to the Cotton Bowl on next Monday.
Well, I will get in Arlington on December 31st, which is media day. They usually make all the players available to us. I can usually get to about every key player on the roster, conduct a short interview with them, see if I can get a story out of that. So might try some features. I usually like to see I'll ask USC players their own questions. A lot of times I do like to see from a Tulane angle what they think of Tulane and certain players on Tulane. Like I'll ask some of the defenders about what they've seen from Taijae Spears and tackling him on film and try to get some stories out of that. But I think this should be a lot of interesting stories arising from this Cotton Bowl with the rise of USC coming back to prominence just 1 year after a 4-8 season. And then Tulane rise to prominence 1 year after a 2-10 season. So this wasn't really a matchup people expected to be a New Year's Six Bowl preseason.
Well, Steve, you'll find USC is wonderful with the media. They're almost as open with the media as the Soviet Politburo. So you should be fine.
I was at USC for that Rice game week 1. I went to the post-game Rice press conference, and it was me by myself sitting in the front row. And when I got out, it was in a tent, just a small tent next to the media room. And when I got out of that press conference, I went over to USC for Lincoln Riley's first game. and it was about as packed as a press conference as I've ever seen for a regular season game. I just crammed myself in a corner. Everyone's just trying to shout out Blair, get that question into Lincoln Riley about his first game. Caleb Williams with him at the podium. So that was quite the media scrum there at USC. So that
Coliseum's classic.
Yeah, it was pretty good venue, pretty good stadium to go to. I was glad I got to make that trip this year, especially in a year where USC ended up being one of the best teams in the country.
For sure. That's awesome.
So, folks, you want to follow Steve Helwick's work at Underdog Dynasty, coverage of various Group of 5 bowl games throughout the week, but then he's going to be on site in Arlington for the 2023 Cotton Bowl. So definitely follow his reports, his analysis, his observations. Steve, thanks for joining us again here at the Voice of College Football. I really
Thanks, Steve.
appreciate
Have a happy New Year. Have fun in Dallas.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this game.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Happy holiday.
Right on.
All right, guys, so let's kick around the Cotton Bowl and anything else that's on your mind. Just foremost thoughts about this game. And I think a natural point of interest is just, how big a game this is, because a lot of people will say, well, it's not the playoff. And a lot of other people will say, well, it's Tulane. And it's just like, let's avoid losing. But, you don't go onto a field and say, hey, let's avoid losing. It's, hey, let's make a statement. So, what kind of statement can USC make? And, right after the Utah loss in Las Vegas, we were hit with the reality, the playoffs not going to happen. But here we are now a week before the game. And I'm sure that for a lot of USC fans, now that this game's 1 week away and hey, it's the Cotton Bowl, it's a New Year's Six game, probably the juices are flowing a little bit more than they were a few weeks earlier in December. But like, how have your feelings evolved on this game over the course of the month of December? Like, has anything changed? Has anything new emerged for any of you guys? Just your thoughts on like the significance of this game and how your thought processes have evolved.
Well, I still want us to not lose.
Well, and the biggest surprise was Tulane. Like I thought, yeah. I just thought he was going to opt out. Maybe it was just me being cynical right off the bat. I'd be like, hey, he's gonna be out. And I love what Steve was talking about their back, and how it's just is the yards after contact and how he's just a beast. But we've faced some good. I'm just thinking Charbonnet, right? That's not the easiest guy to contain, and they came with a pretty good game plan to slow him down. They did a really good job against Notre Dame. Heard about how they're going to run all over their big offensive line. And I think early on against Utah, I think that whatever they were doing was working. They got some early stops there and held them to the field goal. So I think this team's capable. I'm going to be very interested to see the game plan that Grinch comes up with. And again, I think the linchpin of that is what my big surprise for the month is that Tulane's playing, and that makes all the difference in what I think this game's going to turn out on defense.
I agree, and after reading some of the practice reports from the Cotton Bowl, there's unfinished business. They want to win this game. It means a lot to the team, which is great to hear, as you mentioned, Tim. I was surprised too that Tulane's coming back, but he didn't want to leave his brothers, as he mentioned, out there alone. I think they want to get the Utah loss out of their minds. I think from a program standpoint, to go 12-2, to win a New Year's Six Bowl, it's a big statement going into the second year. You want to create more momentum. As we know, at the end of the bowl season, there's going to be about 2 more weeks. There's going to be more transfers going to the transfer portal. USC still needs to reshape this roster, mostly defensively. You need defensive help. So this is going to create momentum going into spring ball. And really this last year in the Pac-12, this purgatory year, we're between the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. So we got to keep on building that roster. So it's a huge statement game, and I'm glad to hear that Caleb's healing. We'll see it when we believe it when he's out there. I have no worries about Miller Moss. I think the Austin Jones is going to tote the rock. And looking at it, Tulane is number 30 in the country on yards per carry. They average 4.9 yards per carry. Very similarly, number 31 is Oregon State at 4.87. USC is number 23 at 5.1. So we'll see how USC's running game does. I think they're going to have their issues. Tulane's going to have their issues stopping all of our wide receivers. I think Steve is well versed with Tulane. He even admitted that. So that's going to be a key matchup. And as he stated, if Caleb is like limited to being a pocket passer, so be it. He can still carve up that secondary.
How are you guys feeling about Gino Quinones at left guard and Mason Murphy at right tackle? So like those guys are being thrown into the fire for this game. And I think those are the two real big pressure points for this USC roster. I mean, you can talk about the defense as well, and obviously that's a real concern. But like in terms of guys who are unproven having to carry the workload in this game, Quinones and Murphy, what are your guys' thoughts about how they shape up against Tulane's defensive front?
Well, for those two young guys, I'm glad that we could slide Dedich over to center for Nealon. That's going to be big, right? They call it the line play. And so having an experienced guy there at center who's been the backup there for a while and has a lot of play under his belt, it's going to be important for him to be in the game. Mason Murphy has shown flashes, right? He's played well, and the coaches and the players talk him up all the time. And Monheim's been in; he's had some trouble, right? But I think that I think they better establish the run early. How about that? We were talking about a lot about the passing, but I think we really need to establish that run early to take the pressure off these guys at pass protection. So if you have young guys on the offensive line, you're going to want to take that pressure off them by just hitting your ears back and just let them do the big guys like to do best, right? Just run downhill and block. And if we can establish the run, that'll take a little bit of pressure off them, especially not having third and long, et cetera. So I think it'll be good to get the run game early.
And how do you think? Go ahead, Rick.
I was going to say you also have Cortland Ford and you have Bobby Haskins. Now, Bobby Haskins has been kind of dinged up all year, so haven't really heard any reports on his status. Not that we really do, but I think the month off is going to help him. And I know, just my opinion, he's the type of guy that he's a competitor. He wants to go out there and compete, and he's gonna go as long as he can't go anymore, because this is pretty much going to be it. His last game at USC, I think he's going to want to make a statement. He was back in New York, prideful to be one of the linemen at the Heisman ceremony. So I look at Haskins and Cortland Ford also contributing. So I think they're going to be fine. They're going to establish the running game, and everything's going to predicate off of that.
With Haskins, I mean, one thing is because Haskins has been hurt his shoulder for a while, right? That's kind of been a known thing now for a while. And Ford hasn't been able to break through. So that, I don't know, has Ford been dinged up or whatever, but that kind of raises some red flags for me. And that brings up a whole nother point. Jason Rodriguez went down earlier in the year. So we're really thin with Voorhees, Rodriguez, Nealon, these guys. We weren't a deep offensive line to begin with, right? Now we are truly razor thin. A couple injuries this game might get really ugly. So let's pray for health.
How do you guys think Lincoln Riley is going to balance Austin Jones versus Raleek Brown? And of course, with a bowl game, you had a couple weeks of bowl practices. I imagine that a lot of USC people, and you guys might be included here, you're really hoping that the bowl game represents a significant step forward for Raleek Brown and his development as a springboard heading into spring football in the 2023 off season.
Yeah, with a year under his belt now, almost, right? He's catching up to college speed. We saw some early mistakes from him, but it looks like, and also later in the season, look for him to break one. Maybe not a touchdown, but a long either play from scrimmage or on a kickoff. Those kickoffs are looking, he's starting to squeak through there. So I think a year catching up to the speed of the college game. I'm sure he's put on some size, over the past 6-7 months. I think you look at a lot of, like we've seen in the previous games, they're going to rely heavily on Austin Jones, maybe some swing passes to Raleek, but that kid's magic. On any play, he could take it to the house. So I do think they're trying to get him mixed in, but establishing the run early and pounding it, I think probably see a heavy dose of Austin Jones in the beginning.
One thing I'm looking forward to is that Lincoln Riley is going to have a month to prepare for this game. And we have a very deep wide receiver room, and each of these guys has flashed. And I think he's going to have situations where each of these guys, he's going to put them in space. And I'm talking about Michael Jackson III. I'm talking about Kyron Ware-Hudson. I'm talking about C.J. Williams. These are guys that you really don't hear about much. And Lake McCree, even Malcolm Epps. There's going to be guys that are going to break out. Josh Follow. They're going to get, obviously, Kyle Ford. But I can see him setting up a play where 30 yards out and Kyle Ford runs a wheel route. And you might have a couple other guys underneath that you don't see. And so he's going to keep on giving these looks to Tulane. And we got so much talent that the odds are going to happen where we're going to break one. And when these guys get in space, they're going to do what they're going to do. And so I'm going to be looking forward to that. There's guys that are always going to step up that don't get a lot of touches, but he's going to have certain looks and packages for each one of these guys.
Yeah, Michael Jackson looked like he was ready to break out, but I think he's injured and questionable for this game. But you can always rely on Taj Washington. You know, we like Rick said, we have the receivers. If there's one position I'm not worried about at all, that's gonna be wide receiver.
Yeah.
Guys, you want to talk some transfer portal?
Okay. Let's bring it on.
All right. Well, one thing, we're going to talk about USC transfers, but I know that our friend Connor Johnson, our Oregon State friend, so he came at me with this one. Obviously, one of the big stories in the Pac-12 transfer portal. So about DJ Uiagalelei, and I would say, Connor, and I invite Tim, Rick, and Tony to weigh in with their thoughts. Of course, we're all going to tackle this one if we all want to. But my basic thought is, Connor, that Jonathan Smith is not making a bet on DJ Uiagalelei. I mean, you can certainly say that he is, and I won't really argue about it. But I just think more centrally, Connor, Jonathan Smith is betting on himself. He is betting that he can fix the yips. He can fix the flaws in technique and in preparation and mechanics that dogged DJ Uiagalelei under Dabo Swinney, within the Clemson program the past 2 seasons. So, to me, this reads as Jonathan Smith saying, I'm the guy who can fix this. I have the formula to help him. And, of course, part of this is not just Jonathan Smith. It is, bringing him into the Oregon State infrastructure and saying, hey, we have the offensive line, DJ. We have the running game, DJ. We have the defense, DJ. We have all these other pieces that we can help you with so that you don't have to feel that you have to be the hero on every play, and you can be a game manager, but then you can, evolve within our system, within our framework, and you can become, a championship quarterback at the end of this process. So it's really Jonathan Smith betting on himself and his system and his culture in Corvallis, and he's thinking that all of those ingredients will enable DJ Uiagalelei to succeed in a way that he couldn't and didn't at Clemson. But hey, Tim, Rick, Tony, your thoughts on DJ Uiagalelei?
I think people are making too much of it in some ways, because let's remember, the best quarterback this team had was an inside linebacker. So if you think that DJ wasn't quite performing up to Clemson, and why didn't Clemson win the ACC? We're talking about a team that came fairly close to winning the conference with their best quarterback being a linebacker. So, yeah, guess what? DJ is going to be the best thing that ever happened to them. I mean, what did they go with? Was it 2 quarters against Oregon without throwing a pass?
They made their comeback without throwing a pass.
Yeah, guys, how can this be anything other than awesome for Oregon State?
Well, we've been talking about it all year. Connor knows this. We've been saying you guys are a quarterback away, right, Tony? Right, Rick? You guys would be terrifying if you guys had a legit
quarterback.
And I think that,
and that's sorry, just real quick. Yeah, if people want to stress about, well, maybe he should have been 5 stars, maybe he should have been 4 stars. Okay, what are they playing with now? 2/3 of a star? Yeah, guess what? They're great. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's right. And Matt, you nailed it with the offensive line. Whatever was going on at Clemson, that offensive line was not. There was for some reason he had the yips, like you said. He was missing passes, but also he was under constant pressure. And I do believe with you got that line. You got Martinez, one of the best, if not the best young running back in this league as your tailback. That's gonna take some pressure off of you. I did tell Connor, I think it was Connor, that they need to work on maybe a couple portal receivers, but that's what they're missing. They get a couple, like they get like maybe a possession receiver, or maybe a safety. I know they lose their tight ends, right? Both tight ends are gone. I know what's his name declared, but so they're gonna need to find something for him, a safety plug to make him relax. And I'll let Rick. Rick had some great points about just what's going on over at Clemson in the mind of a young kid. So
I think this is the most important, obviously, transfer for Oregon State, but this is the most important piece of the puzzle, whatever you want to call it, for Jonathan Smith to now elevate on a national scene, because we all knew about the Pac-12 and Oregon State and how good they were. I think they had a coming out party in front of Kirk Herbstreit and McAfee in Vegas. We knew they were going to roll the Gators. They took care of that. The Gators can make all the excuses they want to. But Oregon State and Jonathan Smith, I think this was his 5th year. Connor, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this was his 5th year. And you look at Coach Witt. Coach Witt's in his 18th year. Oregon State, and I was at the games 2 years ago at the Coliseum when Oregon and Stanford and Utah rolled us, okay? Oregon State is a physical offensive line. They have basically replaced Stanford as that physical, hard-nosed team. Utah is the bell cow. Stanford is by the wayside. Oregon State's up and coming. So guess what? Whittingham, he's going to be going off to the sunset in a couple of years, and Jonathan Smith has this thing rolling. Now you have USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten in 2024. That opens up the opportunity for Oregon State to go down and stake their flag down in Southern California. Hey, look, we got DJU. We turned them around. This is just a great opportunity for Oregon State to take it to the next level and be a dark horse for the 12-team college football playoff, because they have everything else there. They got a tough defense. They got a great offensive line. They got a running game. They got 4-star Aiden Chillis coming on up from Southern California. So this is huge. This is big for Oregon State. And I like the Beavers. I like where they're at.
All right, let's talk some USC transfer portal developments. A number of high-end portal acquisitions. Once again, that Lincoln Riley doing his thing. Which portal acquisition excites you the most? Is it Mason Cobb? Is it Dorian Singer? Is it Christian Roland Wallace? A lot of interesting and high-level guys coming into the program, who are already, established veteran players. Which one are you most excited about? Let's start with Tim, then go to Rick, then go to Tony.
Yeah, so Singer's amazing, but we have receivers. You know what I mean? He's awesome. But so what I think about, I really want to see how Roland Wallace comes in and replaces. We need someone to replace Mekhi Blackman, right? He can come in instantly. He's got tons of experience at Arizona. He can step right in, plug and play, and be that role for us. At or near where Mekhi Blackman was, that would be amazing. I'm sure a lot of Arizona guys coming our way. And the punter, you forgot the punter, man. I know one wants to make fun of the punters, but going from what we had going on last year, which was a total crapshoot, to an all Pac-12 punter, that's just massive.
Yeah, I like the punter as well. They answer some special teams questions that we've had, but Mason Cobb, that's the guy I'm looking at. Physical linebacker. I think he had 96 tackles. He's so much so you could tell Goforth hit the portal rather quickly. Nomura just hit the portal as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing Mason Cobb along with Shane Lee, obviously Gentry in that linebacker room. Then you bring in young Tackett Curtis. So I think he's a guy who's dynamic. And I believe he has 3 years of eligibility left. Not that he's going to use them all, but looking forward to seeing him. Tony? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. I think Singer's great. I think a lot of these guys are great. But in my mind, there is only one big win of this week, and it is Tackett Curtis, friend of the show. He's going to come in and be the new Brian Cushing. I really think we hit a home run with him. Lincoln Riley went and said this is the best best inside linebacker in the country, and he's ours. And I can we get him to? I mean, heck, can we roll him in the RHP program and start him in the Cotton Bowl? Why not? RHP? Penny? I don't know if Penny still runs the RHP program, but Penny, if you do, stick Tackett in Tony Kemp's Western Lit class, and we'll be good to go. That's
your guys' thoughts on other transfer portal developments within the Pac-12. I mean, in terms of what's happening. I mean, we already talked about DJ at Oregon State, but Kenny Dillingham's creating like a Eugene to Tempe pipeline. A number of guys have followed him down there.
Interestingly, is the only team that did not sign a major high school quarterback. Which I thought was interesting. I did a really cheesy George Kliakov's Christmas elves illustration on Twitter. I don't know if you guys saw it, of all the new high school quarterbacks. And so I was a little surprised that ASU didn't have one. And I remain a little more surprised that ASU's big transfer quarterback is Drew Pine.
Yeah.
Drew Pine, by the way, is awesome guy. I would want to be friends with him in a minute, but he just doesn't seem to me like the successor in Bo Nix's offense.
Yeah.
Well, you take a look at.
I honestly figured he'd end up at Princeton or Penn before he ended up at Arizona State. He's awesome, but I hope he does well.
Take a look at Dillingham. I think I read a report that they've added over 30 players in the transfer portal. Dion's added 31. So take a look at that. Look how strong the Pac-12 was this year, and the bottom feeders were ASU and Colorado. They're doing what Lincoln Riley did to this roster. They're turning it over. Everybody's read the reports, seen Twitter, heard the stories about what Dion's doing. This is going to be an unbelievable conference in terms of what you're adding quarterback-wise as well. Tony, you bring a good point about ASU not adding a high school quarterback. When you have Dillingham come that late, that's why I think you got Drew Pine. They'll find a quarterback to bring in. There's still time, but they're going to shore it up with Drew Pine, and they're going to find some wide receivers, and so I like what they're doing there, and obviously what you have with Oregon. Oregon's had an outstanding recruiting class. They're getting some transfer portal guys, and even somebody like Cal. Cal somehow got Byron Cardwell, running back from Oregon. They need a quarterback. So the teams that still need a quarterback really are Stanford and Cal. Cal lost 2 quarterbacks. Jack Plummer just went to Louisville. So Hudson Card got picked up by Purdue. But there's still a few quarterbacks out there that, there's the kid Sam Hartman, who's been rumored to go to Notre Dame. I know Will is really rubbing those rosary beads, lighting the candles, praying that Sam Hartman goes to Notre Dame. But there's a few other quarterbacks. I think the kid from Virginia, what was his name?
Brennan Armstrong.
Brandon Armstrong, yeah. So he's out there. There's a few other quarterbacks are out there as well. So Pac-12 is having an outstanding year in terms of the transfer portal.
Yeah, and if you take a look at this, there's 2 exceptions to this. That are the new kids, which is the Cal kid Mendoza. I think his name's Mendoza. Has actually been there for a year, but didn't play it down. And then the Heward kid's on here because if you're Heward and Montlake, you count as 5 other people. But Wazoo stole the kid from. He's the kid from Santa Margarita who was on his way to UAB. And just a last second switch to Wazoo. There was a lot of real last second switches. Austin Novosad going from he was Baylor's entire class was built on him, and Oregon just swooped in and stole him. So there have been a lot of kids. Colorado's got a couple new ones that actually just since then. Arizona's got a real strong kid. Utah's got a strong kid.
Is Grayson McCall. That kid's out there.
And, Grayson McCall's out there. He'd be really good. There's a lot of potential. Although I thought he was going to Liberty. Is he not?
That was some word, but I haven't seen that.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything. Who knows? We'll see.
Tony, who's number 15 there in the Cal jersey? It looks a lot like Miller Moss.
Does look like Moss.
He does. It's Mendoza is the last name.
Okay.
He's a freshman who didn't play at all last year.
All right. You're scaring me there.
Sorry. No, Miller's.
Well, there will be there'll be a lot more names, probably a lot more high profile names in the portal after the major bowl games. So that might be interesting to see and then after spring, this is not going to stop till after spring. And then you have spring camp, and then so this isn't even close to being done.
Yeah, like we remember Jordan Addison came in May, so like we're going to see roster additions coming in even in the late spring, early summer. But
I think it's important to admit. Chris pointed out it really a crime that number 15 is still not retired at Cal, which it should be.
Pat, what's your take on the transfer role in the Pac-12?
Well, I think USC's put itself in a great position. My best USC acquisition is Mason Cobb. Like that is a rugged, physical linebacker. And we know our Utah friend Larry Pilgrim, and when he came on after the Pac-12 championship game, one of the Larry always makes salient points, but one of the especially salient points he made was Eric Gentry's lack of muscle and physicality in the run game. He got overpowered. That was not like a fit for his skill set. It's more in the passing game and getting into passing lanes, deflections, covering ground with the long strides. So like that was where Eric Gentry really has to work on, his overall development as a linebacker, as a football player. And so with Mason Cobb, you get the skill set that is uniquely suited to hold up physically against like a Utah-like team, either Utah or any other team, which really tries to have a muscular, bruising ground game. Mason Cobb really fits the bill for USC. That's why I think he's the best transfer portal acquisition for Lincoln Riley thus far. So, we know that the chessboard's going to change over the next several months. It's not just the next few weeks, but the next several months. But right now, guys, if you were to look at USC's competition for 2023, I think obviously the four primary contenders are the Oregon schools, Washington, and Utah. So of those four, which one are you most focused on, most worried about? How do you think that those four competitors stack up 1 through 4?
Well, there's a lot of turnover at Oregon, right? And they Bo Nix coming back though is going to be problematic. We haven't seen them, right? So we're playing Washington. My biggest worry about next year is not really other teams, honestly. To be honest, Matt, I'm being dead serious. I think it's about how these pieces fit, because it looks like we've shored up some pretty difficult holes we've had, and now we have a lot more chess pieces, right? You're talking about that middle linebacker. We have it's almost like a Swiss Army knife at middle linebacker now. There's a lot of different profiles you can put in there depending on what defense you're facing. So I think for USC, it's really going to come down to staying healthy and some of these pieces that are coming in. Filling in for some big shoes that will be leaving. Tui Pelotu, I know it's a long shot. People, I'm telling you, no one bank on that. I would, if I was advising him, I'd hope he's going to the NFL. But man, if he came back again, that changed a lot of things as well. So I think that everyone is getting better. We talked about DJ going to Oregon State. Talked about what's going on down in the South. I think the South will be weak now, right? I think it should be. Do you guys know if we're going to have the same type of scheduling next year as far as heavily laden? The schedules came out, right?
No, it's going to be released in January, but they are going to schedule it according to like the familiar framework. And then, of course, it's going to change in 2024 with USC and UCLA in the Big Ten. So they're going to use the familiar schedule format, but they're delaying the release because they want to wait for more transfer portal and personnel transactions to occur. That Merton Hanks told John Wilner that. So they're trying to just create as balanced a situation as possible, because like we've seen, like Oregon hosts Washington after Washington has a California road trip and Oregon has an off week. They're trying to get on top of not having those kinds of imbalances for the bigger games of the season.
Yeah, all the teams you named are losing a lot of pieces, so it's hard for me to guess, when all the dust settles. But I want to bet on, I think USC, if these guys that came in are who we expect them to be, I think that we should be the favorites to win the Pac-12.
I would say that I'm assuming that Cam Rising's coming back. There's been a lot of chatter that he is. I would put Utah at the class of the Pac-12. I see Oregon, Washington, and USC. Any of those teams can be 2, 3, and 4, very deep. And Matt had mentioned that the schedule is going to be released sometime in January. The rotation calls for us to play Oregon and Washington. I would not be surprised to see the Pac-12 have us play Oregon and Washington both on the road, to make sure that a USC and a UCLA do not qualify for the Pac-12 championship game in their last year. I'll put my tin cap on right now, but why wouldn't they? And UCLA is going to get the Oregon State and Washington State schools, but it wouldn't surprise me to have this imbalanced schedule, kind of a going away present. And that's fine, because, hey, cream rises to the top.
So wait, Rick, you're saying at Autzen the week on a Friday night after the week before playing in Seattle? Is that what you're calling right now?
No, I'm not saying that.
Right.
You're saying that right now. I'm just saying
right after we go to South Bend.
It would surprise me. We're supposed to have Washington at home and play Oregon at Autzen, but it wouldn't surprise me to play both of those schools up in the Pacific Northwest. That's okay, though.
Utah's losing I think Utah's losing a lot. They lose Clark Phillips, right? I think they lose both Keith Leanne and Kincaid. Even if they bring back Rising, I think that I like our chances there.
They have a great recruiting class this year. They've been recruiting well. They have a system. They're like weeds, dude. There's like 3 or 4 guys who you even know about that, that they're there, that they're going to fill right in.
But one more thing, Rick.
You pull the weed and 3 more growing.
Rick, they're at the Coliseum this year.
Hopefully. Don't be surprised.
Right, it's true, huh?
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you, they're going to have some surprises. And that's cool. Cool.
And one other thing, and sorry, I know we're probably over time. One of the Twitter accounts that tends to be very accurate on Big Ten stuff. And I mean, we don't like to base anything off Twitter accounts because it's, often nonsense, but has said essentially that they believe that the Big Ten is done adding Pac-12 teams for the very long foreseeable future. And that they expect the Big Ten's focus will be on ACC teams in Notre Dame. And they report, whether accurate or not, we don't know whether accurate or not, but the USC and UCLA have not been interested in adding other Pac-12 teams to the Big Ten. So,
which checks out to me. Yeah. Why do you want to split the revenue pie even more ways?
Yeah, but the point being that USC and UCLA have been encouraging that, Miami's beautiful this time of year. So who knows? We'll see. But this was sort of the order list that they were talking about. Again, whether accurate or not, we don't know. But
it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Pac-12 media rights deal. It should be happening sometime in January. Is that what you're hearing, Matt?
Not exactly sure in terms of the timing. And of course, you have San Diego State and that addition, one wonders about the timing of that and how Kliavkoff's going to lay it all out. But I mean, I'm less focused on the timing and more just on
pony ears, pony up.
I think it's just more on the components. One of, and like with Amazon, for instance, is that the Pac-12's play in terms of getting dollars that are comparable to the Big 12? Just another plot point to watch for, and it's going to be interesting how it all shakes out. I do think that San Diego State's definitely going to be announced to the Pac-12 in 2023, but exactly when, like Kliavkoff hasn't projected to me that he's all that concerned about having to do things right away. And frankly, I think that's okay. Like, I don't think that's a fundamental misread. I think it's more about getting it right. Whatever you're doing, you have to get it right rather than get it as quickly as possible. I think that, Brett Yormark did a great job with the Big 12, but I don't think that the fact that he did a great job and got a pretty good dollar figure, I don't think that had too much to do with the timing of when he did it. And it was just more of he was able to arrive at that number. I think it's similar for Kliavkoff. It's not a matter of getting this media rights deal done sooner. It's, do you have something solid with Amazon or maybe Apple to get, a digital deal along with an ESPN package that will fetch comparable rights fees. So to me, it's less about the timing.
It also seems like Kliavkoff, and this is a function of, I think, the Pac-12 universities as a whole. The Pac-12 presidents and chancellors are not stressed about like whether some dude and his like tailgating trailer RV are impressed with like what he thinks of their handling of football. Like, I joked. I had a post the other day. I had a lot of numbers of the Pac-12, and the Big 12 stuff was in thousands and millions, and the Pac-12 stuff was in billions. And I told people, dollars B does not stand for 1,000. So they run their organizations as multi-billion-dollar institutions, and not as multi-thousand-dollar institutions.
Hey, Tony, I wasn't really planning on asking you this question, but it just popped into my mind.
Oh, I didn't do it.
About off-field stuff. So any opinions about Charlie Baker being NCAA president, in terms of, the NCAA getting a politician, like what you think that means in terms of the NCAA's strategy and tactics coming up in the next few years?
Well, you hired a very effective Republican governor of a very, very Democratic state. I mean, you basically hired like the new Mitt Romney to be quite literally the new Mitt Romney, essentially to be your guy. He's supposed to be a great guy. He's supposed to be really good at building consensus. I guess my biggest concern would be it seems that NCAA leadership are pretty convinced that they need a legislative solution to NIL. And I don't know that they get it. Like, I don't know. They could hire Obama, and I don't know that they would get it.
More importantly, what does it mean for Reggie Bush getting his Heisman back? That's really what I want to know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother thing. I mean, I honestly think Reggie should sue the NCAA, because with the Kavanaugh concurrence, they are essentially legally. I mean, they are just like spent fuel. Legally, they have no cachet. And remember, the NCAA's legal strategy, guys, has always been, we're going to fight you and fight you and fight you and nail you down and declare you ineligible and forfeiting games until you beat us 5 years from now. But with the Kavanaugh concurrence that came out, I mean, again, they got Brett Kavanaugh to sound like Ruth Bader Ginsburg couldn't write a more eloquent ode to workers' rights than Brett freaking Kavanaugh wrote. That's how bad you are. You are so lousy, NCAA, that Brett Kavanaugh wrote an ode to workers' rights in slamming you 9-0. So they have no legal standing anymore. I don't see how they win ever again. And I think that they need to just reconsider and stop trying, because they're not going to succeed.
Speaking of Reggie Bush.
Anyway, sorry for my waxing poetic.
No, I asked you about it, so thank you.
Speaking of Reggie Bush, came out last week on Twitter. He went after Mark Emmert, which was surprising that he went, on a public forum. He called him a crook, a coward. He can't be hiding anymore. And kind of surprised that none of the major media outlets, such as ESPN, picked up on the story, which you can kind of see why they didn't. But before that, the Heisman ceremony, as we all know, Chris Fowler said on multiple occasions, the 8th Heisman. So that was kind of, okay, it's coming out. And then Reggie Bush, a few days later, blasts Mark Emmert. As we know, he's the outgoing president, was supposed to be going out at the end of June. They moved that up to the end of March of 2023. Fox, which Reggie's employed by, is only broadcasting one bowl game, and that is coming up. That is the Holiday Bowl in San Diego on Wednesday night. And I don't know if the Big Noon kickoff crew is going to be there, but wouldn't that be interesting? That's Reggie Bush's hometown in San Diego. So, maybe they ask Reggie Bush about what happened with those comments. Maybe we're going to see that on Wednesday night. And then guess what? ESPN will have to report on it. Okay. And that's going to create some momentum because we're going to go into New Year's Eve, the semifinals, and then we're going to have the college football national championship on the 9th. So don't be surprised if this gets picked up and they start, drumming that Reggie Bush drum because it's time. And so it's interesting to see. Watch Wednesday night to see if if Reggie Bush is there and they ask him about what he stated on Twitter about Mark Emmert, because that would be a beautiful thing.
And I just want to say, as we wind down our show, that you can, folks, you're watching here at the Voice of College Football, you can catch the Pac-12 chat show Wednesday night, and that'll be probably concurrent with maybe the fourth quarter of the Holiday Bowl. So I know that Tony, Tim, and Rick will be wrapping up that game between Oregon and North Carolina, and we'll have some fresh material to talk about in terms of anything that Fox and Reggie Bush say on the air, if there's some news made during that game. So definitely want to watch the Pac-12 chat show on Wednesday, concurrent with the end of the Holiday Bowl. That's going to be
Matt,
a really
can I say
good
something
time.
else that a controversy that USC has already solved? There's a big controversy right now, and it has people just at each other's throats. At West Point, they are talking about they're removing everything at West Point for Robert E. Lee because he was, a traitor who murdered West Point students. And we solved that a long time ago at USC, guys. Just take his name down and hang his number in the end zone and just leave it at that. And that's how you deal with murderous alumni. It's fine. Just number in the end zone. That's all you need to do. Sorry.
I'm not going there.
I couldn't resist.
Well, guys, this show, our weekly show.
Sorry, some of you guys said that went totally over your heads. It's better that way.
This show usually clocks in at like 75, 80 minutes. So we've pretty much gone that far. I know that the chat shows often go a lot longer than 80 minutes, but just for everyone. Hey, first off, Tony, Tim, Rick, hey, thanks for giving of your time on a Monday, St. Stephen's Day, day after Christmas, to help out, give Mark Rogers the night off. I know he appreciates that, but also just
thank you, Robbie.
Thanks for all your work throughout the year, all your help, all your support, your great insights. So definitely looking forward to your Pac-12 chat show on Wednesday, but beyond that, Happy New Year, and just thanks for being such a friend to the Voice of College Football and to me in 2022. It's been real pleasure.
On behalf of Trojan fans everywhere and the USC community here in the Voice of College Football, thank you for being our guru and our expert, and we really can't thank you enough for everything.
It's been a real rich pleasure working with you,
and for
guys.
putting up with us and pretending like we know what we're talking about.
Well, you do know what you're talking about. That's the thing. All three of you. So, hey, so everyone watching here at the Voice of College Football, we will be back next week with the so next Monday, we're going to do the USC postgame show with Tony, Tim, and Rick. I'm going to jump on for sure. Not sure how we're going to handle the fact that, we usually have the Monday night slot So we have the post game show. So I'm just gonna be on the post game show after the Cotton Bowl. You'll definitely be able to get me there. You want to watch us, for that show. So not sure about the Monday night primetime broadcast, but Mark and I will certainly have a plan, and we will put out a broadcast at some point next week. But just you want to be sure to watch the post game show after the Cotton Bowl goes final. That's what you can definitely count on next Monday for USC coverage here at the Voice of College Football. And again, check the Wednesday night Pac-12 chat show concurrent with the end of the Holiday Bowl between Oregon and North Carolina. That should be a fun game, a lot like USC Tulane. So thanks for watching here at the Voice of College Football. Happy New Year. Enjoy this next week of bowl games in the Pac-12 and otherwise. And hey, subscribe, hit the like button, share with friends and family. Bowl season, it's a high visibility time for college football. So tell your friends about the USC channel and all of Mark Rogers' channels here at the Voice of College Football. Thanks for watching us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Fight on, everybody.